Welcome to Business Outlook, a podcast by the Albuquerque Journal, where we focus on 4 revolving themes: real estate, small business, emerging leaders, and technology.
CNM is truly one college with infinite possibilities in tech and data sciences. CNM offers programs where everyone can learn about software, apps, or how to build websites. You can also choose from AI programs and machine learning, the Internet of Things, and so much more. CNM, one college, infinite possibilities, and a proud sponsor of the Albuquerque Journal's Business Outlook.
Hi, welcome back to the Business Outlook podcast. Today we're talking real estate, and my guest is Morgan Cannaday. She's a realtor in Albuquerque and president of the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors. Morgan, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, to start off, can you introduce yourself, tell our audience a little bit about you and the positions that you have here in Albuquerque?
Sure. So I am Morgan Cannaday. I'm the president of our local Realtors Association. I was born in Washington, D.C., but I have lived in and loved Albuquerque since the mid-90s. Proud graduate of St. Pius High School and New Mexico State University, and came back to Albuquerque in 2012 to pursue a career in residential real estate.
Okay. And this year you're the president of GAR. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that organization and what it means to be president of it.
Sure. So GAR is comprised of over 4,200 realtor members that service the greater Albuquerque area. And I was elected to serve as our president this year.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that we're here today is there's a lot of timely stuff going into the news with the changes that have happened to buying and selling homes.
Sure.
Can you give us a little bit of backstory on that and tell us what the big changes are?
Yeah. So these recent changes are a result of a settlement with our National Association of Realtors from a class action lawsuit. And that settlement was announced back in March and took effect at the beginning of this month on August 1st here locally. The two big changes for consumers to be aware of with that settlement would be how compensation is being communicated now and negotiated and written buyer broker agreements. So to start with the latter, prior to touring a home now, potential home buyers will be required to sign a buyer broker agreement with the realtor showing them that home. The intent of this is for transparency and clarity through the process. So that agreement is meant for that realtor and buyer to agree to what services are going to be offered and what the compensation for those services are going to be. It is not meant to lock consumers into a long-term contract. The term of that agreement can be negotiated. So if that potential buyer just wants to sign that agreement for that specific home on that specific day, they can negotiate that with their realtor. The other big change that's happening is how compensation is being communicated. Prior to August of this year, any offer of compensation from the listing side to the buyer's broker was communicated in our MLS, our multiple listing service. And now that's being taken outside of the MLS and needs to be communicated and negotiated between parties as part of the contract.
Okay. So now let's maybe take a step back and and say what was the kind of the traditional way that things worked before August 1st. So let's say I'm a home buyer. Mm-hmm. I go get a realtor to guide me through the process.
Sure.
And what has typically been like the compensation for realtors who are involved in these housing transactions?
So compensation has been and will remain negotiable. I think with this rule change, we will see more buyers opting to pay for that compensation themselves for their realtor representative to make their offer more competitive, especially in multiple offer situations, so that seller is not having to take on that cost.
Because typically the seller would pay for the commissions?
Yeah, I would say more times than not, there was some type of offer of compensation in our MLS to a buyer's broker that, if that was sufficient for that buyer's broker, then their buyer would not have to come out of their own pocket. Obviously, they still have to come with their down payment and their closing costs if they're getting a mortgage and that kind of thing. But I think we will see that shift a bit now.
Okay. And so when I've gone through this process, I hired a realtor and they were there for everything, every step of the way. This could be different. I could maybe get into a one-day contract to tour a home and then use a different realtor later. I'm just kind of confused with how that whole thing would work.
Yeah, so it really comes down to the terms of that contract. For me, my business is built strictly on referrals. So buyers that have worked with me before, that I've bought and sold homes with them before, have no problem immediately stepping into a long-term contract up front. If I'm meeting a buyer for the first time, though, I want to get to know that buyer and make sure that we have a good working relationship and I'm able to provide them with the services that they're looking for. So when meeting a buyer for the first time, I think most realtors are going to opt for a shorter term contract. And if, you see a few homes with that realtor and decide that that's not a good match for you, it is within your right at the end of whatever that term is to go seek the services of another realtor.
Okay. And at its basic level, why does somebody want a realtor? What services do you provide that a home buyer might be overlooking if they're not doing it?
Sure. I think, for the vast majority of consumers, the purchase of a home is the largest financial decision of their life. So I think it's extremely important and within their best interest to have someone that has the knowledge and experience and data to help guide them through that process. Not only to be able to provide them with the data of what that home is worth, but also through the steps of that transaction as far as knowing what inspections are available, and knowing how to navigate, and above all else, having someone negotiate the best contract for you on your behalf.
Mm-hmm. Because most people who are buying a home, they're not contractors, they're not home builders, they're not realtors and real estate brokers. Mm-hmm. What do we not necessarily know that you can really provide us?
I think that the biggest thing in the first step is going to be the data, being able to calculate and figure out what a home's true value is, so that we're avoiding any issues with the appraisal later on, because we know when we're making that offer what that home's actual market value is. Again, the rest of that is those extra steps of knowing what inspections to get or that are available to you as a home buyer, and how to negotiate any repairs or issues with the seller.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen the movie Money Pit with Tom Hanks?
I have.
See, they probably didn't have a very good realtor.
I would agree with that.
So, with this, if people are bypassing their realtor agreements, could people, do you think, be getting into more money pit type situations? I
think that's my biggest concern with this whole process is, especially with our first-time homebuyer or low-income homebuyer markets, you have families that have been saving up for years to have enough money for their down payment and their closing costs. And if they find a home that they're interested in and that seller is not willing to help with those concessions to pay for their buyer broker representation, their only choice, if they want to move forward with that home, would be to go through that process unrepresented. And if you don't know what to look for or what to negotiate as part of that, you can put yourself as a consumer in a pretty vulnerable situation.
Yeah. So so those first-time home buyers, the lower-income home buyers, they're maybe most at risk with not having a realtor not having representation. Who do you think might be some of the potential home buyers who do elect to go without representation and do it themselves?
I think we're going to see a lot more of our investor home buyers that have been through this process, countless times, that know what to look for already, that even though they are not realtors, they have enough experience that they might feel more comfortable going through this process without that representation, or negotiating less services with a realtor as part of maybe a lesser compensation plan to still have that representation, but maybe not to the same extent and hand-holding as someone that's not been through the process before.
And you talked about like the investor class of buyer. If they're, confident enough in their experience to not have representation, they can maybe just take what a low-income buyer would use for representation and just put a little bit of extra money in towards the seller. Could it make it maybe easier for an investor to buy a home and a little bit harder for that first-time home buyer?
I am personally very concerned about what this is going to mean for our first-time homebuyer and low-income homebuyer consumers. I think speaking to the sellers in that situation, though, I think it's important that for a seller, instead of focusing on whether or not that buyer is asking for help with that compensation, to instead focus on which of those offers is going to net you as the seller the best proceeds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, let's maybe just do an overview of the Albuquerque housing market. What kind of trends are we seeing? What do you think is the biggest trend that you're seeing in the industry right now?
Well, I think the most exciting thing to come out of this week is a reduction in interest rates. We are sitting at 6.35, which is a 15-month low for us. So to put that in perspective, at our high last fall, we were at 7.8% for a 30-year mortgage. And this reduction is hundreds of dollars a month in a buyer's monthly payment, thousands of dollars a year that they're saving just with this lower interest rate. So I think we're going to see a lot more buyer interest in the market because they're going to have more buying power in that. We are still seeing a very low amount of inventory coming on the market. So that is still a point of frustration for buyers, is there's just not enough homes on the market for them to choose from.
Yeah. And interest rates ticked down. What were they, like 6.5%, you just said? So,
we are at 6.35 today.
Okay. And back in 2020, we were at like what, little over 3 and change?
Historic lows, yes.
Were we spoiled? Are we ever going to get that again?
And that, yes, we were very spoiled. And, there is a direct correlation between the Fed rate and our mortgage interest rates. And because of the pandemic, they were very kind with their rate, which helped our rates be artificially low. And I think that's the biggest point of confusion or misinformation for buyers right now. I speak to buyers and so many of them say, we really want to buy right now, but we're going to wait until rates get below 4% again. But when you look at the data, especially like long-term historical data, our average interest rate historically is about 7%. So we are already below average right now. And all of our national economists aren't foreseeing rates drop below 6% for the next year to 2 years and probably beyond.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we've done some stories on the business desk about how there are a couple communities in Albuquerque that are seeing some pretty rapid home growth. Los Diamantes, that's in Rio Rancho, Mesa del Sol, and you can go there and see, dozens of homes all being under construction. You haven't seen that elsewhere in the Albuquerque metro area. What do you just think about some of the homes that are being built kind of in mass right now? Is that going to affect this inventory issue when...
We are very grateful for our partners in new construction, for them to not be afraid to continue building and help us with this inventory issue. I think what it is a part of the potential solution to this problem, but it's not the full solution. And the reason for that is our cost of construction is still so incredibly high right now that the homes that are being built are not homes that our first-time homebuyer market or our low-income homebuyer market can afford. But what we are hoping is those already locked-in homeowners can upgrade to these new construction homes, and then the starter home that they purchased, say 5-10 years ago when rates were low and all that, they can upgrade to this new construction, which provides their current home available to one of our first-time home buyers.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about how these rule changes that just went to effect August 1st, I believe, here in New Mexico, we've been talking about how they're affecting consumers, buyers and sellers. How are they affecting professionals like you in the industry? What's, I would imagine you're having just to negotiate more on the fly. Yeah.
There is definitely, this is going to lead to two things. I think realtors are going to have to increase their value proposition up front so that consumers know what they have to offer and their services. I think the other thing it's going to lead to is much more communication between parties to be able to negotiate any offers of compensation as part of the contract.
Well, that could be a positive, right? Increase in communication. This is a newspaper. Transparency is kind of the name of our game.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just like with anything, but especially in our industry, communication is always key, but more important than ever now.
Mm-hmm. How fast are homes staying on the market in Albuquerque these days?
We've seen an increase in days on market, but it is still, again, below our historic averages, especially in our lower price points or in specific areas of abnormally low inventory. It is still extremely frustrating for buyers because they might see what the average days on market is and say, oh, I have some time to think this home over and make sure it's the right home for me before moving forward with an offer. But in certain price points in certain neighborhoods, we're still seeing multiple offers in the first 24 to 48 hours on the market.
So it kind of depends on that price point. Just because $1 million home has been on the market for a long time, someone shouldn't think that they're 300 or whatever the price point is going to last around the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think are the next big trends on the horizon in the Albuquerque housing market?
We are hoping that interest rates will continue going in the direction that they've been going, so that buyers have more buying power in the market. I think the most frustrating thing last year for buyers is as interest rates kept going up, buyers were having to go back to their lender and figure out what that price point was for them now, meaning if interest rates went up by a fraction of a percentage, that was $100 a month that maybe they could no longer afford. So buyers were having to progressively reduce the price range that they were looking in. And now I think it is a bit exciting for buyers in that they're able to do the opposite, where they can afford more house the lower interest rates go.
Okay. And Morgan, thanks a lot for joining us today. Are there any other just closing thoughts that you would like to leave us with for either a buyer or a seller?
I would just say, realtors are here to help, and we're going to remain an integral part of the home buying and selling process. And although change is scary for realtor members as well, I think this overall is good and is pro-consumer. And I'm excited for what this all means.
Okay. And then leaving real estate aside, in 60 seconds or less, what's your favorite thing about New Mexico?
Oh my gosh. We're interviewing for a position at our Realtors Association right now. So speaking to a bunch of people out of the state about the state, green chili, without a question of a doubt. But I live right at the base of the foothills, and I have rescue dogs. So being able to walk outside every morning and go for a hike on the beautiful Sandia Mountains, there's nothing that can beat that.
Oh, nice. You've got rescue dogs? How many dogs?
So I also foster.
Okay.
I joke that I have an urban farm because I have 2 rescue dogs, a rescue pig, and I also foster dogs. So at any point, there's at least 4 animals running wild in my house.
Okay. Wow. You get along with your neighbors?
Yes, actually. I would like to think that they all still approve of me as a neighbor, yes.
Okay. Well, I have a rescue dog too. So,
awesome.
Yeah. Well, Morgan, thanks a lot for coming on and joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.